that's the repercussions of this, that if you're going to go rogue against the tide, you got to expect schools and other entities to take it very seriously.
Welcome into another great week, another great conversation here on Cousins Conversations. And I can't think of anybody better for the big news this week in college football with Brendan Sorsby now eligible than having Scott Dochterman from The Athletic here to talk about it all. Scott, how are we today?
I'm doing all right. It's June, and you'd kind of think we should be coasting a little bit. Instead, college football never sleeps, and it seems like every June there's just the news just gets bigger and bigger, and this is no exception this year.
Yeah, here we are 86 days out, and we have one of the biggest stories of the season, and we haven't even kicked it off yet. So let's start there, Scott. When this first came across your desk, what were your thoughts about just how a judge can now overrule what an NCAA eligibility rule is?
It's really unfortunate, I think, across the board, because you're talking about an issue that I think we all is like accepted law. Or an accepted rule at the NCAA level, and really for all sports, that you're not allowed to bet on your team. It's just something that it's been institutionalized since 1919 with the Black Sox scandal, and they were all banned, 9 of them. And over the years, we've had Pete Rose, the all-time hits king. He's never been in the Hall of Fame because of this, and I think that's why you look at this situation as it's a sad ordeal. It's not that you think that he should get the death penalty or anything, but when you bet on your own team, there are consequences. And those consequences are kind of surrendering your eligibility at the collegiate level, and that's what the NCAA ruled. There's been a loosening of those regulations over the years, where we know a few years ago in the University of Iowa and Iowa State University had 41 athletes who were lost some eligibility because of betting, and the NCAA has loosened some of those rules and restrictions. But in this situation, or any situation involved betting on your own team, it's always been the third rail. You do not touch it. That's over. And in this situation, Texas Tech found a way by skirting those rules by using a retired judge, to allow him to compete. And I think what this does, even though Texas Tech is now threatening lawsuits if anybody retaliates or sanctions them, I think that this is a situation where they're going to have to look at the good of the whole rather than just the narrow interpretation of what this does for them this year. Because if they just selfishly decide to play this guy, Brendan Sorsby, then I think you're looking at a structure that could come crumbling down. Even though their changes are absolutely necessary to college sports, this is not the type of scenario that you want to have everything implode because of.
How do you view Texas Tech's comments on this? Because we had Joey McGuire saying, "Hey, this is not murder. This is not abusing anybody," and he doesn't even think that maybe Sorsby's even ready for week 3 because he thinks his addiction is so bad. Plus, you had the booster come out and say he's trying to do everything possible to fix this situation. I'm not sure what he's doing to fix it, but just what are your views on what Texas Tech has come out and said about this?
It's almost comical. If you're going to use that as your barometer, well, he didn't kill anybody. Well, are you going to just decriminalize everything in this society? There are rules. I can't commit wire fraud, but I'm not killing anybody if I do it. I driving drunk. Well, I didn't kill anybody. Oh, okay. So it's all forgiven then? That's there. When you have certain people, and I guarantee that in Texas Tech they're very much this way, that very staunch, and rules are rules, and and there are consequences. Well, not for this situation. Why? Because it benefits them. Now, would other schools be the same way? Probably, to some extent. That if they spent $4 to $5 million on a quarterback and all of a sudden he's not eligible because of gambling, they're going to find ways to justify it and allow him to compete. But I think they're taking it too far. And let's not use any kind of false equivalencies here. I mean, this is, just because he didn't kill anybody or beat anybody. I mean, come on, we're not stupid. We weren't born last night. This is something that has to be, you have to have these in place. And if you're going against the entire world on this, which is everybody in college sports, your entire conference, and, and most of the general public, you've got to figure out that this isn't a good place to be. And you could play the villain, you can play the rogue, and that's what they're trying to lean into, that nobody wants us to succeed, we're just little old Texas Tech. No, that's not it at all. What this is a rule that in betting on your own team, it's always been, you're done. And for that to be skirted, to me is it's kind of ridiculous.
That's always been the hard line too. And now there's been reports that the Big 12 come out and maybe talking about boycotting playing Texas Tech this year altogether. You had Georgia and Nebraska's ADs come out and say, we're not going to play Texas Tech in any sport. So just to have now these schools kind of put that hard line and say, we're not playing Texas Tech at all. How do you see that?
Well, that's the repercussions of this, that if you're going to go rogue against the tide, you got to expect schools and other entities to take it very seriously. And now within the Big 12, there was a meeting today, and there'll be another one on Monday. Now that there's been threatened legal action by the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, who's running for senator, that's an issue that I think that you're seeing. Kind of a stubbornness from Texas Tech, but I think everybody else is looking around going, what can we do if you're the Big 12? I mean, I don't think a boycott is realistic among the Big 12. I mean, you're in the same conference. You're just not you can't do that. But I think there are ways to, and I think the Big 12 is the primary line of defense here, because when you're in a conference, there are certain rules within a conference. And if you're going to skirt eligibility rules, then the conference needs to step in. It's something that in the Big Ten that's been over the years, I mean, over more than a century has been applied. And I think here as well. And when you think back a couple of years ago at Michigan with Connor Stallions, who was was videotaping, and it was an illegal operation to film different games from the sideline, and it turned out that Jim Harbaugh and the staff were all suspended for 3 games, and during the season, and it just happened to coincide with games against Penn State and Ohio State, which are 2 of the biggest of the season for Michigan, and so even though they didn't go far enough for most people, they still went pretty far. And in this situation, I think the Big 12 is the one that can find ways to do it. And if Ken Paxton in Texas wants to sue them, well, they're going to have their own issues dealing with that as well.
What is the possible solution, or is there a solution going forward with this?
I mean, I think the most simple way to go is for Brendan Sorsby to enter this NFL supplemental draft, and I'm sure he would be selected. I don't think he'd be a first-round pick by any stretch, and frankly, with all of his issues, I don't know that he would be even next year if he had a great year this year. That would be something that teams would really vet. So I think that's probably the most simple solution. However, I don't know that that's going to be the case, and then it's going to be up to the Big 12 and Texas Tech leadership. I mean, are they going to, continue stubbornly to defend him? And addiction is not, it should not be taken lightly. It shouldn't just be, okay, I'm a gambling addict, and then, after some outpatient, courses, then all of a sudden, oh, I'm fine, I'm cured. I mean, let's not make it trite here. I mean, we're talking about something that's very, very serious. And in his case, making $90,000 worth of bets, and many overstate lines. I mean, even when he got to Texas, he made these bets, some bets. I mean, it's if you treat an addiction, it's like alcoholism or some other form where you've got to be at it every single day. And so I don't know what that means. I mean, when he gets to an athletic venture, I think that means that there's going to be some challenges there for him to not surrender to his old self when it comes to this topic.
As someone in your position covering this as a national writer, how do you go about this when it comes across you?
There's a lot of people on our staff who covered it probably a little bit more closely than I have. I have written a few stories, but Justin Williams is as good of a reporter as there is in the country, and he works for us. He's been writing a lot about this, and you try to find all the angles and all the the information, whether it's Cody Campbell, who's the super booster, who's basically the Texas Tech owner these days, and kind of runs the Big 12, and getting his angle. And then I think you look at something like getting the what the adjudication was from the Texas court, which we did, to trying to find out what everybody's thinking and doing at a local and national level. Today, we checked with the Big 10. There's not going to be a conference-wide boycott, because in some ways, if you do that, then you can open yourself up to collusion and that. But I think individual schools will be allowed to schedule who they want. So in some ways, it's like they all can say, well, we don't want to. You try to look at all the angles, and you try to examine the judge. You try to do it as much as you can, due diligence day after day after day. And I think we're in that situation now, but it's also, when does this come to a head? When does the Big 12 decide, all right, we're going to take action? And I think they're being thorough, and it makes sense. We're in the middle of June. The ruling just came down. But I think it's something that, as time progresses, we're going to see some pretty big spikes in information.
NCAA has already made themselves look bad in a lot of other situations, but now with this situation, how bad do you think this really is for them now?
It's existential in the fact that somebody can overrule one of their biggest rules. A judge, you can call him a rogue judge, an activist judge, something like that. And I think that's fair, because if they can overrule a cardinal tenet by the NCAA, it means the NCAA has zero teeth, that it doesn't strike any kind of fear or anything from any organization. And it could very well be that the judge had a buddy system, with Cody Campbell or people at Texas Tech, and he was a retired judge at that. That's all possible. There's a discussion, and it's not final, but he was, they're in the same country club. He and Cody Campbell are in the same country club together and play golf. So that's something that's also part of this. So, but for the NCAA, it's been emasculated over the last handful of years, ever since the court ruling allowed, NIL to go through, and it perpetually has lost, many, many cases. And I think this one would be the biggest one, because the others people agreed with. This one they don't. And if you can't enforce one of your cardinal tenets, then what good do you have as an organization?
So where do we go from here now? What do you think? What do you think happens?
I think it's a waiting game. I mean, the NCAA has issued an appeal for this, and once once an expedited ruling at a different court, it'll go to the Seventh Circuit or Seventh Court of Appeals, which would be in Amarillo, Texas. All four of the justices there are Texas Tech graduates. But you don't know if that means that they're going to rule one way or the other. It's hard to say. I mean, you could go in the state of Iowa. There's a lot of University of Iowa graduates who are judges, but that doesn't mean that they're going to automatically look the other way on certain things. So, but the trial's not scheduled until February, and so they could kick the can down the road until January, and then next thing you know, we just drop it and move on, is pretty much what Texas Tech would do. So, that's possible, but I do think that any kind of action has to probably come from the Big 12. I mean, you're the conference, you're a part of, everybody's a part of this, and you oversee it. I mean, just like if this was a case at Wisconsin or Minnesota or Iowa, that it would be a Big Ten issue as much as it would be an NCAA issue. So I think that's something that we'll notice. Going forward, it's going to be a Big 12 issue.
Let's go to Iowa. You cover a lot of the Iowa athletics. That's how I know you. Just the year for Iowa athletics in general, with what Ben McCollum did with the men's basketball team and all those things. Well, what kind of year was this for University of Iowa athletics to have success?
I think it was a good year for Iowa. Football, they were right there and just fell short. 4 games lost by what was it 15 points, I think, total. It was really a challenging year from that perspective. And, because they were so close to going from being a good team to a potentially great team, losing games to Indiana and Oregon. Indiana won the national title. Oregon reached the semifinals. Both games were in the final, decided in the final minute. And so that probably leaves a mark, but I think they were a really good team, one of the better ones they've had. And they've had some decent ones under Kirk Ferentz in the last 10 years, but I think this was, in the upper third of that echelon. Men's basketball, I thought, was a turnaround season just to get to the tournament. You look at, they hadn't been there for a couple of years, and then fired Fran McCaffrey, brought in Ben McCollum, changed the entire structure of the program. I mean, it was usually number 1 or number 2 in offense in the Big Ten and always last in defense. And they flipped that around. But I think, what basketball's about is March, and Iowa hadn't had a successful March since 1999. So I think this is to get to the Elite Eight, for the first time in 39 years was, quite the accomplishment in year 1. And now his problem is he's going to have to do it again and again and again. I don't know if that's the case, what'll happen, but, women's basketball being kind of the third biggest sport, had a really strong year. I thought that their talent wasn't as good as what they've had in recent years, but they played together and they had they were able to do some good things. And unfortunately for them, they couldn't get out of the second round. They lost an overtime game and at home. So that was, tough for them. But overall, I thought it was a successful year. So, I think for Iowa, I would grade it across the board as a B or a B plus. Wrestling was not the sport that it should be. And other sports, are just kind of hit and miss, just it kind of depends. I mean, track still going on. And there's a few others, but I thought overall it was a pretty decent year.
What did you see from McCollum in the fact that he comes in and he's able to set a different culture? And a lot of people are like, oh, he's bringing in all these mid-majors, but they're players that were familiar with his system who came over from Drake to have success like that. What do you think made it happen so quickly and he was able to get that buy-in?
In some ways, it was real similar to what we saw with Curt Cignetti in Indiana. When you bring in players who know your system and you can immediately install them and they're bought in, then that enables everybody else around them to buy in too. And in his case, he had 1 player returning from the previous year. So it wasn't like he came in to install a system that nobody was familiar with. I mean, he had half the team was familiar with it. And had a Bennett Sturts, who's one of the best players in the country. That was really helpful. And then largely you saw a team that, played hard. I think that's one thing you could really tell. And played hard on defense, which is something we haven't seen in a good 20 plus years, I think, in Iowa. So overall, being able to impact his system that way, and I thought was really a strong showing for him. And, again, just to get to the tournament after missing it, I think 3 years was a good move for Iowa, step forward, but then to beat Florida and to advance to the Sweet 16, number 1 seed, great shot. And then to beat Nebraska in the Sweet 16 really reflected that this is a team that Ben McCollum has a structure in place. I think there's a lot of faith. And for the first time in a long time, I could see a lot of excitement for Iowa basketball.
Lots of excitement. And we also talk about people's journeys on this show. So the fact that you've built your way up to the Athletic and you've been here to this point just kind of take people a little bit through your journey and how you just grinded through the newspaper grind to where you at now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm originally from Burlington, Iowa, and and I worked there as a part timer, as like a full time part timer. I think I was, like, don't work enough to get full time pay, but work full time hours. But my first real job, I guess, was at the Muscatine Journal, and I was a sports reporter there. I covered high school sports, a little bit of Iowa when I could, but mainly high school sports, and kind of bounced around a little bit through the Midwest. I was a police and county government reporter in Fort Dodge, Iowa, which probably helped me a lot in my career, because when you're around police and you're around lawyers and in court settings and learning different things, it's really helpful. It kind of helps get you familiar with things that aren't just stick and ball and box scores. I spent 6 years as sports editor of the St. Joseph News Press north of Kansas City. It was a staff of 12. I did the Kansas City Chiefs, and I was also the sports editor, which was a challenging way to juggle. But again, it was a lot of fun and a good place. And then 10 years at the Cedar Rapids Gazette as a beat writer for Iowa and kind of Big Ten at large at times, and then enterprise and investigative. So, and I did some news there, did some of the really hard news, murders and stuff once in a while. So, I guess I have this, pretty rich background where I've done a lot of different things that's kind of helped me get to this position. And, I never was just, I always tried to expand my horizons, if you will, where I would try to do more than, not just Iowa, but I would try to do broader topics to keep me sharp. And one thing I always remember when I was at the Gazette in particular was about midsummer, I figured, what, I need to refresh myself on deadline writing. So I'd always volunteer for like one baseball game, high school baseball game or softball game, usually a district game, just because I want to go and write on deadline to get to sharpen up a little bit. And so I always enjoy doing that as well.
Always learning. What's been your biggest takeaway from all your years working in sports and covering crime and doing all those things?
That's a good question. I think just, you know, I think you have to have a broad perspective in how you cover sports. And it's not just narrow the game, because, then, and you really learn this when you start to cover colleges and more, and bigger topics, because everybody's watching the game. They already know what happened. You're just going to have to bring something bigger and better to it. And you always want to do that. I have to, where I'm at, but also you want to do this, which is bring topics to people that they don't expect. The worst possible thing, and this happened a lot even when I was a newspaper writer, and I was a product of it, is sometimes you become, I'll say, a slave to who's there. It's like Tuesday in football season, they bring the guard, so there's a feature about the guard, and then the safety shows up. It's like, well, we wrote about the safety and how he's become a team leader, which bores the tears out of me, because it's like everybody's supposed to be a team leader, and so then next week, same thing, and it gets really monotonous. And I've always tried to operate a little differently, that you want to look at topics that are bigger, better, different, that I think that's what people want to read. And, I've done I was an adjunct professor for a semester at Iowa. And one of the things I always told, I still do and tell younger people, whether they're in TV or radio, or audio bent or writing, is that you want to do something you're proud of at least once a month. And you do it, and that's a bigger project. It's not just going to games, because I learned that when I was in Muscatine, where you could be so driven by the day to day. All right, there's a game here, I'm writing about the game, feature, game. And all of a sudden you look at it, you go, what did I do that I'm proud of, that's going to give me another job, and, well, nothing. And you don't want to get yourself in that position. You want to write some stories that have, or produce some stories that have some zip to them. So I always use that as kind of a goal, a North Star, if you will, just to kind of say, make sure, and I'm in a different place now where I have to be more enterprising in how I, write. It's not but I always make that suggestion that you want to make sure you're looking at stories that have a little more impact than, hey, the right guard showed up today, so I'm going to write about the right guard in tomorrow's paper, because the readers can spot it. They'll ignore it pretty quickly.
Oh yeah, we all know that grind. Yeah, local TV too. They hand you whoever you have. You
Mhm.
have to make a story out of it. Oh, we
Yeah.
all know we can bond over that as far as publications thing like that. But there's a lot of digital publications now more than newspapers. So that kind of with the flip of writing and everything. What do you see as the success in the future of writing now being mostly online?
Yeah, I think that it's, the one thing that stays that stays constant is the people still want information, and they want mediums to provide it. And whether it's my phone or a newspaper, a TV, or a digital, website, it's all information, and people want it. They want it packaged. They want it, and sometimes they want it raw, but sometimes they want it packaged. And I think what you want is, you want to provide that for people, and however you can do it, and do it in the right way, because people still want to be entertained. They still want to be informed. They want to be informed on their topics of interest, which I think has been outstanding with the, I mean, when I started a million years ago, I mean, it was, internet was just a drop in the bucket. I mean, we had it, but we had one computer in our office that had it, and nobody really uploaded anything to it. So now it's, it's your lifeblood. You work on it every single day. So I think that, you know the forums themselves will still be very, very important. And as people move away from newspapers, it's important to make sure that you provide that same type of content in a way that people will still, it's still digestible, but do it for your phone, your iPad. People, they do that, and I think there's been a lot of transition there. I could certainly fault legacy media for a lot of the missteps along the way, and there have been so many going back to the mid 90s where they could have done some things differently immediately back then, but you had a group of selfish people who saw it as, I'm just going to continue to sell ads at the car lot and the hospital and the mall, and voila, get my paycheck. And instead of, then they lost out in the big picture. So I think overall that, people will still want information. They want it. They want to be entertained. They want to be informed. It's just, you got to find the right platform and forum to give it to them in a way that they can easily digest it.
How have you adapted over time, and maybe something you could tell people about how to adapt over time to the new medium that keeps changing all the time?
Yeah. Well, I have to keep adapting more so than the people who are younger. I mean, the younger people have already adapted to it because that's their life. I mean, when there's people in their mid to late 20s, they've known nothing different than the internet. It's, or the cell phone or whatever. It's for more for people like me. But now, granted, unfortunately, way too many of us, myself included, will sit down at night and have something on television and scroll our phone the whole night, and that's horrible, but it's the truth. It's just, we have to continue to reinvent ourselves and how we want to do that. And there are, the AI conundrum is real for journalists, because sometimes those outlets can condense information more quickly. You just want to make sure you do it better, and you provide it in a way that, again, that people can't get it. It's like, I'm sure there's a way, or there will be a way, where AI can take a box score and spin a story off of it. And, but your charge is, don't let that happen. Make it better, because people can read the box score. People can watch the game on the TV. You've got to provide them with context and depth and detail that they can't find anywhere else. So that's still, for me, paramount. And I've been at The Athletic now for 8 years. We're an online publication, but I still get a charge when my stories appear in the New York Times. Newsprint, that's still a pretty big deal to me. But by and large, I've completely focused on mobile and web as my primary outlet and forum.
Yeah, you talked about AI and how maybe, it's not as specific and it doesn't have that human quality voice that we feel through writing. How have you kind of kept your style and your voice and people come into your stories through this time?
Yeah, it's interesting because I still prefer, I do like having a voice, and I can tell my style in certain ways. And whether it's, I try not to pattern it too much because you want to diversify when you can. And it kind of always depends on the story, but, whether it's anecdotal lead to, you know, description, how, but it's a tug of war with me. And I always say I hate myself and I'm going to, get fired for certain things, just because I, you know, I'm like, I'm starting to write and I'm like, I hate my story. I can't stand it. This thing, it sucks. I'm going to get fired. I'm horrible, and then you work through it and you get done. But I would say every other story, I feel that way. It's just a part of the game, and it's like, oh, what do you mean you're, you just go through it. And so, um, I don't know, you don't want to get stuck in a pattern because then it's boring and dry, even if it's got some life to it. But I, so, good question. I guess it depends on the material I have and how far I can take it.
Life of a journalist, always a grind. Scott, where can people follow you if they don't already follow you?
Yeah, I'm at the Athletic. So go to theathletic.com, and I'm on Twitter at Scott Dochterman. Is my primary areas there, and a couple other, more personal sites. But follow me. I try not to be too rambunctious on Twitter, but every now and then that happens. And I do write quite a bit. Although this month is just very sporadic, but we've got a ton of big picture stories that I'm working on, and a lot of money stories. We have a pretty big series coming up in July that we all have different stories that should be very entertaining. So follow along and hit me up.
We look forward to reading all those. And of course, if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you hit that subscribe button below. Weekly episodes here on the YouTube channel. Scott, I appreciate you hanging out with me here on Cousins Conversations.
All right. Thanks for having me, Nick.
All right, have a good week, everybody.